now that we've spoken about attitudes in general, let's focus in on what we call workplace attitudes. And there are four important workplace attitudes that it's important for us to understand in detail, especially if we're going to be managing people in the workplace or leading people in the workplace in the future. Let me describe them briefly. I'll talk about them in the next several slides, but let me articulate what they are. So the four important workplace attitudes are what we call organizational commitment. The second is called employee engagement. The third is perceived organizational support. And the fourth is job satisfaction. And these four attitudes are very strong because they're linked with outcomes that leaders want the most. So, for example, if you have an employee that is strong in all of these four workplace attitudes, you are likely to have a more motivated employee, but you're likely also to get the type of job outcomes that you want from these employees. What kind of job outcomes could you want? A good job, satisfied customers, profitability, etc. So these four workplace attitudes are extremely important for us to understand and to measure as we go through our leadership careers. So let's talk about each of these in turn, and I'll be able to give you some examples from my own experience as both an employee, as a manager, and as a leader. So let's talk about the first one, organizational commitment. And organizational commitment is the extent to which an employee really identifies and is committed to an organization and its goals. For example, if you're a student, you might choose where you go to school depending on whether the goals of yourself are consistent with the goals of the school that you go to, right? If it's important for you to get good internships, you might choose a school that's strong in giving students good internships, for example, right? And you're likely to be more committed to that organization if you share common goals. So when your goals equal the organization goals, then you're likely to have a strong level of commitment to that organization. One of the first jobs, actually the first job I had after I graduated college many years ago, was committed to education. And it was actually willing to pay for degrees, college degrees, graduate degrees for employees if they did a good job. That was very consistent with my goals. And so I had a really strong organizational commitment because our goals coincided, right? We shared the same goals, and I was more likely to be committed. Another interesting example, which we'll talk about later in the course, is the company Starbucks, the coffee company. So when Starbucks was trying to hire people in China, when it first went to China, it realized that in order to create a commitment from its employees, to get a commitment from its employees, it needed to show that it valued the things that its employees valued. And in China, it's very common for an employer to offer insurance for employees' parents, because in that society, people of a certain age are respected, people of a certain age are revered, and it's important in that culture for people of a certain age to be taken care of, possibly even by their children. So this caused Starbucks to rethink its benefit system. And when it made available that insurance product for parents, it really did create a stronger organizational commitment among the people who work in Starbucks China. The third example I'll use is a company called Salesforce, which you might have heard of. This company tried to connect more closely with its employees who really wanted to do volunteering to help people, volunteering to assist for charities and things like that. So Salesforce created this program where every employee could take 7 days off in a given year if they were volunteering to help other people with something, whether it was charity or something related. So again, these are ways that companies try to increase the organizational commitment of their employees by creating goals that are shared with most of the employees. The second concept that's important to understand is employee engagement. So if you're an engaged employee, then you have a sense of urgency about doing your job. You want to get it done quickly. You want to get it done well. In fact, you're so motivated to get it done well that you're focused, you're intense about doing it, you're enthusiastic about doing it, right? So engaged employees tend to also be very strong, very capable, very productive employees. I can tell you in my own experience that I didn't always succeed, but I tried to have my employees be as engaged as possible. Why? Because I know that engagement is directly linked to these four things: the level of urgency, the degree of focus, the degree of intensity, and the degree of enthusiasm. Those of you who are on sports teams or used to play sports or even watch sports might know the difference between an engaged teammate and a non-engaged teammate. The engaged teammates are likely to be focused, likely to be very intense, likely to take it very seriously when other teammates are late for practice because they really are engaged and they want to get the job done. Now, if engagement is so important, what actually contributes to employee engagement? What are some real things that you, as leaders, can do if you want engaged employees? You can't just tell them to be engaged. You need to give them the chance. You need to give them the ability and set them up for success when it comes to being engaged. So there are several things that can be done. And they're divided into three different factors. One is organizational level factors. One is person level factors, and the other is environmental characteristics of the job. So let's talk about organizational factors. If you are in charge of leading people and you want them to be engaged, several things that you can do are give them opportunities. I remember when my boss years ago gave me the opportunity to receive higher education, when my boss gave me the ability to manage other people, when my boss gave me the ability to learn more, I was much more engaged in my job. All right, so giving people opportunities is one way of helping them stay engaged. Another way of helping them stay engaged, again, at the organizational level, is communicate with them, right? Let them know what's going on, bring them in the room and talk to them about important things happening in the organization. Imagine if you are a worker at, for example, McDonald's, and your boss makes decisions without consulting you, or your boss doesn't tell you about important things going on in the company, then you might just view your job as very narrow, right? Making burgers or making fries. But if your boss brings you in to meetings, if your boss communicates to you about important things going on at McDonald's, then you're going to be a much more engaged employee. Okay? Let's look at some person factors. So there are some person level factors, people level factors that also help us be engaged. And one of these is positive or optimistic personalities. So if you're a positive person or an optimistic person, you're more likely to be engaged than somebody who's always negative. Okay? If you are a very conscientious person, right? Conscientious means you take your work seriously, you try to help, you try to excel, you're also more likely to be an engaged employee. And then at the end, we have environmental characteristics. Environmental characteristics are things related to your job environment that can increase engagement. So employees tend to be more engaged when they're asked to do a variety of things as part of their job, right? So if your job is just very boring and you're only doing one specific thing, you may not be as engaged as if your job consisted of 3 or 4 or 5 different activities, for example, right? Again, let's use the example of a worker at McDonald's. If the only thing you do all day is make the fries, that's okay. But you're more likely to be engaged if, during a typical day, you make the fries for a couple of hours, you make the burgers for a couple of hours, you interact with customers for an hour or two, and then maybe you're in a meeting for 30 minutes offering your opinion on different things going on at the McDonald's. So employees tend to be more engaged when they're asked to do a variety of tasks and not just one. The other aspect, and this is important for those of us who are leaders, you're more likely to have engaged employees if you have a trusting relationship with your employees. If you show your employees that you care, if you show your employees that you're interested in their well-being, if you show the employees that you're charismatic about your own job and don't hate your own job, then you're more likely to have engaged employees. So these are just a couple of examples I'm highlighting about how you can play a role in increasing the employee engagement of your own team. Again, why is it important to have engaged employees? Well, let me show you some specifics. It's important to have engaged employees because, as the research shows, employees that are engaged lead to 4 very important outcomes. Employees that are more engaged lead to happier customers, right? If you walk into a store, if you walk into a Walmart, for example, and all of the employees are miserable and nobody's engaged in trying to help you, then you as a customer are likely to be unsatisfied. But studies have found that increased employee engagement actually increases customer loyalty and satisfaction by about 10%. More engaged employees also increases the performance of those employees. Employees are just more productive when they're more engaged. In a few cases, we found that productivity of employees goes up by 20% if they're more engaged. They're motivated to work more, to try to help the company because they feel that high level of engagement. More engaged employees also have a higher sense of well-being, and companies that have more engaged employees tend to have better and stronger financial performance as well. One thing for you to think about as students is think about what a teacher or what a professor could do to increase the engagement of students, now that you know a few things about employee engagement. In fact, you should take some time after this lecture to think about a few of the things that you would do as a professor if you were trying to increase the engagement levels of your employees.